slides here. What are we doing in this topic? Well, my goal is I want you to be able to achieve a return on security investment. I think that is probably one of the things that we really need to do a lot when we're talking about executive management teams and leadership and trying to get them to back our efforts. We need to demonstrate return on security investment. And I want you to stop being the chew toy. That means the chew toy for the bad guys, the chew toy for management who thinks you're blowing IT budget and you're not getting a return for it. So let's stop being the chew toy. And that means where do you focus your efforts? Well, we need to focus our efforts on the things where we're going to get the biggest bang for our effort. And please don't squirrel on shiny objects. As you saw in our panel discussion, we talked a lot about fundamentals. And I'm very, very strong on fundamentals. I think that if you don't have your fundamentals down pat, then why be squirreling away on shiny objects and thinking like, well, I'm just going to go get some other new product to go take care of this problem. It's like, well, maybe you've already got something in your stack that's going to deal with that. So this is me here. I've spent more than 50,000 hours of my life being a network security architect. And I personally have done over 300 network security architecture, re-architecture projects. And I'm a CISO for very large organizations. I'm on the ASCII product advisory board. I've got a podcast that's actually pretty darn popular. So it's really for IT professionals. So I encourage you to check that out. And I've invented some numbers of fun things. I also run the CISO channel on the Tech Tribe. So if you're on the Tech Tribe, get on the CISO channel. Okay, these are some resources, and I leave those for you to check those out at a later time. I do have some nice little career resources for folks as well. So let's talk about some fundamentals here. This is the shiny object, right? Let's go try and find the stuff about, let's get the indicators of compromise for the latest and greatest campaign here. Well, actually, let's focus on our generic hardening rules. This is where the most amount of malinvestment in any sort of an organization comes from, is when they're throwing more tools at problems instead of dealing with these fundamentals. So let's make sure our fundamentals are rock solid before we go crazy off on, trying to get like the next tool that's going to give us the next fancy threat feed, whatever. Like that's really just not going to help you. Remember that the bad guys only have to be right once. We as the blue team defenders, we've got to be right 100% of the time. Okay, so this is the little bottom section here is from one of the largest insurance brokers in the United States. And according to that insurance broker, this is what you've got to have. So, what are we doing, right? We don't want to be the chew toys. We want to be legally defensible in everything that we're doing. And if you focus on being legally defensible, you are going to have legal defensibility, but you're also probably just having a fantastic proactive security posture. So I would say take a look at this list and see how well are you mitigating those things. Notice the last one in the lower right-hand corner there is vendor digital supply chain risk management. Well, that's really TPISRM. It's third-party information security risk management. So what are our consequences for not having a legally defensible posture? You may not have any policy. You may not have a cyber insurance policy. Your premiums are going to be potentially ridiculous. So now that's more money getting lit on fire for insurance that really probably should have gone into proactive prevention. Your claim could just be outright denied. Let me touch on that a little bit. I've done a number of podcasts on that topic, and it still continues to be the thing that hampers people the most, is that they've got all these great security controls in place, but they've never put any system in place where the source technical system generates those reports on a fully automated basis and publishes them into an attestation repository where they cannot be altered, cannot be tampered. So that is a component of CMMC. It's also a component of CIS. It's that difference between IG1, IG3, and you yourself can achieve that. All you need to have are report repositories that can ingest things based upon, like, let's say I can send an email on a scheduled basis to an email address with a report attached, and I've configured my source system to do that. If you have a place where you have a report repository for compliance purposes that will ingest that and hold it, retain it for, let's say, a year, and if it doesn't get a new one, if you've said it's going to be there every week and you don't get a new one, you need to have a mechanism there where it's going to alarm and alert for you. So that attestation proof is super, super, super critical, because poo-poo hits the fan. Your breach attorney is going to want to see that stuff. The plaintiff's attorney is going to want to see that stuff. The DFIR, data forensic incident response firm, is going to want to see that stuff. Everybody is going to want to see that proof. So you better have a paradigm that whatever tools that you're using facilitate your ability to have a pattern of evidence and proof. It establishes your due care, due diligence over time. So strategy. Let's get a framework together. We need to risk assess what the situation is. Get a model. I think the easiest model that you can possibly use is CIS. It's applicable across the board. If you had to pick one, that's part of the analysis paralysis that I see happening frequently. Is they're like, I don't know, should I do NIST CSF? Should I do ISO? Should I do COBIT? Just do CIS, please. If you have to comply with HIPAA, fine, comply with HIPAA, but you should at a minimum be doing CIS. If you got to pick one and start someplace, start there. It's free. Just go get the CIS tool set and, figure it out. Assess your situation, prioritize your problems, and then get to work. The next piece here I have for you, this is a little screenshot. These are a couple of screenshots out of an actual CIS assessment that I do for our clientele. And you can see it produces pretty scores, charts, and graphs. You can use those pretty score charts and graphs to be able to have good communication with your executive management team and say, hey, we spent all of this money doing all of these things. We've allocated these human capital resources to getting this stuff done. But you know what? We used to be a 1.5 and now we're 3.15. And, fantastic. Look at our progress. But when you do stuff like this, again, please make your timestamp, make a report, upload it into your report repository, have that as proof, because that becomes demonstrable due care, due diligence over time that you've been working, improving things. The Kaizen I talked about earlier in your implementation plan. Okay, let's talk about the CIS sandwich. This is a terminology that I've coined. A lot of people just got the wrong paradigm. And this is foundational fundamentals. If you're going to be successful with these things, you just got to get your paradigm right. So I describe this as a sandwich. If you've looked at CIS, there's 4 primary components to all of it. The foundational bottom layer of the bread is, do you have a policy? A lot of people think that IT can just solve all the problems, right? Who's in charge of information security risk management? Well, isn't that IT's problem? No, actually, it's not IT's problem. It's the entire organization's problem. More so than anyone else, it's actually the executive management team's problem. So there's a real fundamental, paradigm problem as to who's in charge of what. When you understand that everything that IT can do, everything that IT is empowered to do, comes from an approved written policy, you got to start with the policy first, right? How do you get the backing of the executive management team? Let's have a policy. IT, draft the policy, get it to them and say, hey, I need you guys to review this, to participate in the building of this policy, to enforce that policy throughout the organization. And here's what problems we're going to solve by having a policy. So that's why policy is so darned important. It empowers IT to do the technical controls that they know needs to be done. So again, paradigm shift. CIS, start with your policy first. Then the next piece of the meat that you're going to put on your bread is, do you have your controls and are they implemented? Fantastic, get that done. Who does that? Well, typically it's going to be your security architect in IT. Then let's put some veggies on our sandwich. And do we have automation for our controls? Are they enforced, right? Is there a mechanism with, there's a difference between, yeah, we've made it possible for people to do MFA, but then the next level is, no, we've enforced it. No one can possibly authenticate unless they've gone through conditional access and MFA. Now that top layer of the bread, I've already touched on that. It's that reporting. So in CMMC, that control being reported to the business is that there's a whole separate party that has to review those reports and then review them and say, yes, the stuff is happening that's supposed to be happening. That's not terribly practical in the SMB market. So if you have that report repository compliance center sort of functionality that I described, that can function as your report to the business components of this. And then you can give the executive management team, the compliance officer, an external auditor, the breach attorney, whoever you need to provide access to those reports, you can. That keeps them out of the source systems as well, because I think we would all agree we probably don't want those sorts of folks in the source systems. So again, realize it all starts with policy, and we in IT get our authority from policy. Here's a link to the CIS Community Defense Model. Please download that thing. Let's take a look at what are the top 6 things that we can do in order to get that return on security investment. Okay, this is tectonic. I cannot describe enough to you how tectonic this particular table is. CIS has already done the hard work for us. They've taken the minor attack framework and they've looked at that in basically a pivot table shape with the CIS safeguards or CIS controls. And what we see here is that you need secure configuration management. So if you haven't got secure configuration management, why are you spending time thinking about other shiny things? No, go get secure configuration management down pat, because that's where you're going to get your biggest return on security investment. Overall, if you're trying to have a communication, you're trying to convince executive management to provide you support, financial, resource, time allocation, whatever it is, use this table. This is so impactful. It is astonishing. It's, leverage the authority that comes from other parties. It's not Joe and IT coming to the executive management team saying, hey, we need to do this stuff. It's like, no, this like international standard called CIS, they say we need to do it like this. All right, so use this table. Please, please, please use this table. It's ridiculously impactful and it's very persuasive with executive management teams. I put together this little list, just a really high level list of just some completely obvious things, in my opinion, that people ought to be thinking about doing with regards to vulnerability management that they're usually not. So SSRS, what is that? SQL reporting services. They typically haven't hardened that. Have they gotten rid of NTLM, disabled LLM&R? What about SAM-RPC hardening? How are they maintaining PowerShell so it's fully upgraded on all the systems that they have all the time? I mean, that doesn't happen through Windows Update. You've got to actually run scripts to do that. What about patching GPO Central Store with the latest and greatest templates? So the things I've got on here is that this is not go look at your RMM or go look at your endpoint protection product that has software management, software patching built into it. No, these are the other things you need to be thinking about in terms of vulnerability management. And this goes to what I was talking about in the panel session, was that what is your definition of full patch management? What is your definition of full vulnerability management? That should be in your policy, right? Draft that darn policy first and then back that up with procedures. So hopefully this will give you some ideas about like, we didn't quite realize we ought to be doing, patching the power supplies on our servers, for example. Okay. This is, I apologize for a busy slide. That is Whiskers. He is the InfoSec rabbit, and you will see I have InfoSec rabbits. I'm the only CISO in the entire world that's also a rabbit breeder, and they are actually the company mascots. So that's Whiskers. He is the security enforcer rabbit. And that is the look on his face when people have bad cyber hygiene, okay? So that's what these little items here are. Again, more things, tips and tricks for you to have better cyber hygiene, because we want Whiskers to be a happy rabbit. This is, again, another lovely chart that you can utilize with your executive management teams to convey strategy to them, to help them visualize things so that they can get behind you and back you in the resource allocation for organizational Kaizen to improve the cybersecurity posture of your organization. And I did a couple completely spanking hot podcasts, really deep dive on these topics with one of my security engineers. And there are the links to them. I would encourage you to check those out. Super powerful stuff. So I wanted to pivot now to question and answer session, basically. So who's got questions for me? You guys want to throw them in the chat box, throw them in the question box?
Anybody have any questions? Love to hear them.
You can come off a mic.
Nope.
No questions, huh?
Well, this is a lot of great information though, and we'll make sure that they get a copy of this, your slides as well.
Okay, good. Well, how are we doing on time?
We have 6 more minutes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so fast. I'm so fast. That comes from many years of doing a podcast. You're able to rip out some information really quickly. Yeah. I'll go back to this whole thing, full disk encryption. I think one of the paradigm failures that I see is people using six different tools. And I touched on this in the panel discussion. There's like 6 different tools that people are using in order to do their endpoint risk mitigation approaches. And really, they got to seek and try to find one that is going to help them do it all as much as possible. And the reporting aspect, I can't stress enough. I mean, like, so many of the endpoint related security posture, management tools that are out there just have really insufficient reporting capabilities. We need to have whatever your source system is. You need those systems to be able to generate those reports for you so that you have what I call security velocity. And I'm not the only one that uses that terminology. You're sitting in a court of law, you're sitting in some sort of an arbitration hearing, poo-poo has hit the fan, and somebody says, prove to us. So you said you had this policy for vulnerability management. You said you were patching within, every 30 days or something like that. So you said, this is what your policy says. And you filled out the cybersecurity insurance application that says that you had this in place. Where are your reports that are getting automatically sent into your document management platform that prove that security velocity over time? The products that I like, they give you little security like patch charts over time. The one that I use gives me a lovely report that I can publish every week using automation that it says, these are your outstanding patches, right? So unapplied patches across your entire fleet over the last 12 months.
And Felicia, a question came in. One was that will this session be recorded and sent to us? Definitely will. And then the other one was, I think the part you touched on, scanning every day is incredibly important. What would your advice be to a security team working with a development team, as they always seem to butt heads?
Okay, so actually I have the answer for that. The answer is you need a CISO that can speak both the language of the infrastructure team as well as the software devs. This is something that I do. I'm the peacemaker. This is part of the nuance of my job as that CISO. And it's really hard. You generally don't find, the software devs, they don't speak the language of the infrastructure and systems people, and, vice versa. And it can't be head to head, right? There are actually methodologies where everybody can come to the table. And I say, inject your CISO in there as long as you can find a CISO that can do that stuff, because that CISO can create this roadmap, this paradigm under which all of the teams interface. And I strongly recommend finding a CISO that's got really hardcore technical skills. One of the things that frustrates me a lot is when you've got a non-technical CISO who maybe they understand the compliance things and that, and they are talking to the executive management team and say they're hearing things from the infrastructure team, where the infrastructure team is saying, hey, we're having a problem with this, or we've brought these problems up, whatever. You need that CISO to back you. And if that CISO doesn't know how to do your job, how effective do you think they're going to be at backing you? Now, that also comes into play when you're talking about the irritating folks in software dev, which, by the way, software is the bane of my existence. So I feel your pain. Okay, totally feel your pain. But you got to have somebody that can bridge the gap of that language and frame it to where we're all on the same team. And it can be hard, but you've got to have somebody that can garner the respect of everybody at the table. So next question was, when an organization has a lot of security ground to cover, the best starting place, not necessarily most important from a security standpoint, but the area that gets the most enthusiastic buy-in from the company management. Excellent point. Because if you don't get backing, then you're going to stall. So the place to start is, I would say, hit up my podcasts, because I address that very topic pretty regularly on my podcast. And you need an assessment, and that assessment is going to show, hey, we don't have cybersecurity awareness training. We don't have phishing testing, phishing training. We don't have continuous vulnerability assessment, right? List out, do that assessment. It can be your own internal spreadsheet if you want. I would argue, go get the CIS documentation and run through an assessment, right? That isn't going to cost you anything other than your time. And it's going to give you a starting point. Have a starting point, and then you get the next piece is, where are we going to go? And that is going, and then have the executive management team participate in that decision-making process with you, because you need that executive management team to say, this is what's keeping us up at night. We think that, our people are the biggest attack surface. So what should we do first? Well, maybe we should do cybersecurity awareness training first. And how much is that going to cost? Well, shoot, that's less than 10 grand a year. Oh, heck, let's just do that right now. Right. So that's where you get your biggest bang for your buck, is you've got to have executive management to back you. And if you involve them in that risk decision-making process, and give them the easy button, by the way, what I do is I say, here's where we're at. Here's where we need to be. This is what I think the roadmap is. I've prioritized things for you. You guys on the executive management team, you decide amongst these top 3. I'm giving you 3 to choose from. You decide which one are we going to do, and when are we going to do it? When are you going to give me the money to do it? And you'll win every time with that process, because they are fundamentally the ones that need to be making that risk decision. You need their involvement and their backing and support. So